So this morning, sometimes we talk about trick questions and what have you, and someone might think that this morning is like a trick question as we continue our class for studying sin seriously. But before we get into that, so we usually say it this way: people don't like the Bible and they don't like religion because they say that it's too what? And we would say it's not restrictive, it's constructive. So as we are doing, someone would say, well, you guys sound really negative, like giving a whole series of Bible classes to studying sin. So when we are actually studying things not to do as Christians, what are we in fact doing also? Okay, if we're basically saying this is not the way to live, we're finding out the way to live. So it's not a negative class. We're finding out, we're basically, in one way, doing a study of Christian attributes. You know, someone would say, well, why didn't you call it studying Christian attributes? Well, we might do a little bit more when we get done with our studying sin seriously class, but for the moment, when we're finding these things that we don't want to do, we are in fact finding the way that we do want to live. Now, here's why I say this morning's class, someone might say it's a little bit of a trick question. So, this morning we're going to look at sin and anger. So, right off the bat, when you have a class called Studying Sin Seriously and you say we're going to study sin and anger, what is someone probably going to say? And this is the element where we say, is this a trick question?
Being angry is sin?
Yeah.
I didn't really... Go ahead, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that being angry, like your sin, why are you doing it? He said anger is sin, and it's basically the same thing.
Okay, now, what were you going to say, Mark? Or what did you?
That's what I thought you was going for. What people would say is, if you get angry, it's a sin.
Okay, so some people are going to say we're doing a class studying sin seriously, sin and anger, and someone would say, well, getting angry is a sin. And then there's going to be somebody else, though, we introduce it on the screen, sin and anger, someone's going to raise their hand and say, what else? Okay, they're going to then say, Paul said in Ephesians 4:26, be angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. I get that, right? You can be angry, and it is not a sin. Now, we're going to do a whole discussion on this morning, and we recognize, is this text really giving you like the allowance, or like be angry and sin not? I recognize I can be angry and not sin in my being angry. Is this really like giving a promotion or giving a license to be angry? And someone might say, well, you still can't call it sin because he said right there, be angry and sin not. So for your notes, we're not going to dive too deep. You could go all through Psalms, you could go all through Proverbs. But as we look at this and we say, by studying sin, we start looking at what we would like to be. You don't want to do this, but you want to do this instead. So I do agree with Paul. You can be angry and actually not sin, but there are two things in particular. Proverbs says you don't want to do what with an angry person?
Strive.
It might say that. It's just not the one that I'm using. I can be angry and avoid sin, but Proverbs is going to give a general rule. You don't really want to be friends with these type of people. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go. So, you know, a lot of people are going to use Ephesians 4:26 to basically, they're angry and they're in their moment of anger, and someone says to them, well, I don't know why you're getting so worked up, and they will say, be you angry and sin not. It's not like this is just giving us a pass. And I would say this too, on the front end of this, we're still at the beginning. Does anybody need a definition of anger? Or do we all get that it is an emotion of displeasure? We understand what it is. So someone might say, well, there's a difference in emotion of displeasure and then there's acting out because of your emotion of displeasure. We understand that too. But with an angry man, he says, you don't really want to be friends with these people. Do you know, now let's say it this way, if I don't want to be friends with them, and this is going to be in the Proverbs, if I don't want to be friends with this type of person, then I'm sure not going to want to do this either.
With them or be with them.
Okay, let's say it that way. Jackie said be with them. You're not going to...
I was going to say imitate them.
Okay, you're not going to want to imitate them. He's also going to say in Proverbs 21:19, you don't want to live with them. So, when Jackie said you don't want to be with them, living with somebody is the biggest state of being with them you can be in. He says it is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman. Somebody gets caught right away and they say, well, why is this just directed at women? Well, it's not going to really be that much pleasant with an angry man either. The idea is we don't want this to be our regular practice. Even when Ephesians 4:26 says, be angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, there's a whole host of people who heard this or read this for the first time and they all knew. Well, we get that, but Proverbs 22 says, and Proverbs 21 says, you don't really want to be friends with this type of person, and you don't really want to live with this type of person. So let's talk about this too. Be angry and sin not, and someone doesn't like the negativity. Is it such a big deal that the Bible is saying, don't be an angry person? Like, yeah, I'm saying...
I would say, going back to Cain, God asked Cain, why are you wroth? I mean, he got anger, and his anger led into...
Okay, so that's where you're saying, yeah, it leads to a big deal, but I'm saying for people who are told, you need to work on your anger.
I find it strange if a person took offense at not being able to hold on to their anger. If we're saying it's an unpleasant emotion, why would it be that somebody just wants to wallow and dwell in it?
Right. We're saying it would be better for you. The Bible's saying it would be better for you to come up out of it. And somebody says, no, I'd like to stay here. So, if we're being honest, some comedians will say, anger and frustration, they'll say, well, that builds for good comedy. A lot of comedians talk about things that bother them. What bothers me? But if we're being honest, do they stay in a state of anger all the time? And are they really that angry when these different things happen? Or are they just saying, we noticed this and it was weird? So the Bible, like I'm saying, someone says, well, I don't know how I feel about the Bible telling us how not to be. Well, I think that across the board we would agree, staying angry is not going to be a very good way of living. So you don't really want to be friends with these type of people. You don't really want to live with these type of people. But as we say it that way, what should we be making note of? You don't want to be friends with them. You don't want to live with them. So what should we say about this for ourselves? We shouldn't be that type of person. We don't want someone to say, I tried, can't really be friends with that guy. And also, basically, Proverbs 21:19 is only going to apply to married individuals, so you don't want to be that type of a spouse. So now let's keep going. When we say we're working on our anger, someone already threw out, well, you can be angry without sinning. And so really, who's going to argue to this degree? Like we're still, this person, when we say what are folks going to say? They're trying to build a case for their anger. What are they going to say in return? If we got some anger problems, we need to be working on our anger problems. What are they going to then say back to you?
You don't know my situation.
No. You don't. It's not helping your situation. Mark said, you don't know my situation. Well, I know that it's not helping your situation to stay angry about it.
And anger is often appropriate. God was angry.
Okay, let's look at this.
Well, the one that comes to my mind is that's my nature. We all,
Right. And that's something that I wanted to say too. That's I always say that about what TJ used to say. So the statement Mark just made was, somebody says, well, that's just my nature. I get angry. And so people say, well, I just have a temper. And my statement back to that is, we all have tempers. The issue is, do you control your temper? And so the thing about TJ is TJ used to always, when he had a runny nose, he would say, I've got sinuses. And I would say, TJ, we all have sinuses. You just need to blow your nose. So when someone says, I have a temper, everybody's got one. You're just not controlling yours. So here's someone justifying it, right? You're getting angry. And we're saying, maybe it would be helpful for you to find a way to work on this. And then someone's going to say, well, Jesus got angry and he flipped tables. John 2:15. When he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, he poured out the changers' money and overthrew their tables. Yes, I understand that this is there, but what I would say back to that is, what would you say to somebody who's justifying their anger by saying, well, you know, Jesus got angry and he flipped people's tables over, and they say, I haven't even started flipping tables over. What would you say back to them?
Which was justified.
Okay. Well, then they're going to say, I'm not like disagreeing with you, but they're going to say, well, I feel like I'm justified in my anger.
Where's the person setting up an illegal business in your house?
Okay. That I would say that's still like on the justification thing. Ian says, well, you know, it's the idea of, is this an allowable thing inside of the Lord's house? My statement back to people is, more times than not, when you start getting mad about like religious injustices, then we'll talk. Are people really getting mad about religious injustices? No. It's like always these personal affronts. I did not like the way they treated me. I didn't go for that. It's like, okay, we've got all these different passages about turning the other cheek. 1 Corinthians 6, suffering the wrong. So when your anger is actually boiling over because of, and let's really talk about this too, the idea of changing out their money, maybe don't do it like Ian said, in the temple, but it is a real thing of people are coming from foreign places. We go foreign places, we have to exchange our money out. So it's understandable that this could be, what would you call it, a convenience for people, but then also the idea of someone says, well, they're gouging them. Okay, I get that. But this is, in a sense, this is a big time injustice to the people, and that's why he is upset. He's defending these people who are being gouged and taken advantage of. So when you start having religious boiling overs, we'll talk about that. But even then, we'll talk about that when they start having this.
I was going to say, that was like as the disciples saw, that was like the justification they attached to it, wasn't it? It was zeal for the Father's house, not...
Yeah, it wasn't like,
my own personal...
yeah, this is not a personal affront. They all said this has to do with the religious setting. So, someone's justifying their anger. They say, well, Jesus flipped tables. Someone arguing back at them, what are they going to say? Someone has now used Jesus flipping tables to justify their anger for personal affronts. Okay, they're going to say, you're not Jesus. Or they'll say, Jesus only did that once. It wasn't like that was Jesus' regular practice. Does that mean Jesus never had anger? Like someone say, well, he had righteous anger. It's anger. So you look at Mark 3:5, it says, when he had looked round about on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he said unto the man, stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as the other. Now, here in John 2, this is a good thing, because we said he's basically taking up for the people who are having injustices put on them. Does anybody know? Oh, well, it's right there. What's going on in Mark 3? 3 verse 5. What's he doing? Okay, he's healing a man. So you can actually be doing a fantastic thing, and in the moment, you are angry. You're doing good deeds. Why is he angry? Again, someone says, well, Jesus got angry. Why is he angry here?
That's with the hardness of their heart.
People are standing by, and you have Jesus in your presence, and he's actually able to heal somebody of their illnesses, but you don't want him to do good things because it's the Sabbath day. And he looks at them and he basically says in himself, because of the day of the week, you don't want me to do something good for this man. And he's angry about it. So someone would say back, you don't get to just say Jesus flipped tables and therefore you get to be angry because he only did that once. Well, it's not like he was only angry once. Then in Mark chapter 8 verse number 12, it says he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek after a sign? Verily I say unto you, there shall no sign be given to this generation. So back in Mark 3, he heals a man with a withered hand. He obviously is able to perform these miracles. Someone like Nicodemus admits it. No one can do these things except God be with him. And they just keep asking, we need a different sign. We need something better. And so it says here, he sighs deeply. I like the study of the book of Mark. really, because it does show, as you keep going through Mark and Luke, a lot of times you're going to find where it says he had compassion on the people. When you read Mark, you see a lot of Jesus' frustration. He really feels how we feel. So someone says, well, Jesus only did that once. Well, he was angry and he was frustrated more than once. So here we are, y'all. We're doing a study on anger, but we're also basically getting some illustrations on how these conversations go. It's chess. One move, next move, next move. Someone says, well, it's okay for me to be angry. Paul says it's not a sin to be angry. And then they justify their anger by saying Jesus got angry and he flipped the tables. Somebody says, yeah, well, he only did that once. Now we start building a case that, well, he was angry more than one occasion. Now what's somebody going to say? They say, wait a minute, I've got a problem now. We did John 2, Mark 3, Mark 8, where we showed at least 3 instances where Jesus was angry and frustrated. Now what's somebody going to say? It's going to be one of these statements where somebody says, I don't know about that. What is it going to be? I don't think you can just start painting this picture like God is angry all the time. I don't want to do that. In Psalm 103, verse number 8, it says, the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. In John chapter 2, he flips the table. Was there not plenty going on for Jesus to be angry about? Like if someone's going to say, well, God is an angry God. There's tons of stuff going on in that time frame where he could have basically been, blowing his top, boiling over. And we don't see him pictured that way. And I would say, because Psalm 103, the Lord is slow to anger. But when you see John 2 happening, it is such I would say, an injustice to the people. Here we have come for our feast day. We want to have our mind on spiritual things. And what has it turned into? It has turned into, have you seen, do you know what happens when you exchange money? It's not like you just swapped out paper for paper. What happens? You're either watching your money increase or you're watching your money decrease. So you swap it out and you're having to think about, okay, this is how much we need, this is what we need to do, and it's turned into this whole thing. And so in that moment, this is, what did he say, Matthew 23 about their tithes? They're really fixated on he said, the less weightier matters. So this has turned into a moment that's distracting from the bigger picture. I don't want to build the case that God is always angry, but we also don't want to allow people to use Jesus flipping tables to support an anger problem. So, now let's do this. We're going to come back to this type of thinking in just a moment, but now let's start looking at Bible examples. So, we actually want one more. People want to pit Paul and James against each other in a lot of ways. So, here's what somebody says. Paul says anger is not a sin, but what does James say about anger? Okay, let's look at this. James chapter 1, verse number 20. He says, the wrath of man works not the righteousness of God. So, we already made the statement. It's not like Paul is saying in Ephesians 4:26, let's all just be angry. But then you come to James chapter 1, verse number 20, and James is saying, it's not really doing you any good. The wrath of man is not going to work the righteousness of God. So, can anybody tell me just briefly before we move on, what are we really getting at as we talk about we want to recognize anger problem and we want to try to move away from an anger problem. We're actually going to be fulfilling something else that Jesus said to do. What are we going to be doing? Okay. If you're not blowing up on your neighbor, you're doing a better job of loving your neighbor. What else are we going to be doing for ourselves? Okay, giving mercy to receive mercy. We should be making it easy on ourselves. In one sense, y'all, like the text would say, there's multiple places where he says, don't worry. And so, I would say if we can practice a way to not be frustrated and not be angry about different things, we are then relieving ourselves of certain stresses. This is beneficial for us. It's beneficial for our neighbor. So now let's look at this. So, a lot of people, and let's say it this way too, how would you say a person being told like they have an anger problem, What do you say to someone when you tell them, like, you have a smoking problem or a drinking problem? What do they say?
They get defensive and say, well, I can quit anytime.
Okay, in their mind, it's not that big. They say, I could quit whenever I'd like to. So when you start talking to someone about anger, what will they say about themselves? And let's just go ahead and put up our first one. This is what Mark has already said. Okay, I want to get to this one. What was Cain before he was a murderer? Someone might say, well, improper religion. Yeah, that's true. He offered a sacrifice that was not according to faith, and God did not accept it. And then, before he was a murderer, Mark already made this point, he was very angry. Now, here's what people say when we talk to them about their anger problems. We say, before Cain was a murderer, he was angry. What's somebody going to say back to that?
I'm a far cry from murder.
Okay, they're going to say, yeah, but that's not me. Right? They say, I get angry sometimes. Who doesn't? I got a temper. Who doesn't? You start showing them things in the Bible and they will say, but that's not me. That's exactly like when you say to somebody, hey, you got a smoking problem. They say any type of problem. I can quit when I want to. You tell them they got an anger problem, they say, yeah, but I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't be doing that. And I can't imagine that Cain, who is a religious person, right? He obviously has a desire to give something to God. I can't believe that if someone had said, Cain, by this time next week, you are going to actually be murdering your brother in the field. I'm a lot of things. I don't think I'm capable of killing my brother in the field. So now let's go backwards. So when people say, yeah, but that's not me. So we said tempers and everybody has one. I will say, I don't know where I got my attitude about driving, because I don't think my dad did that the way that I remember it. So if we're saying people got to work on themselves, you guys probably wouldn't hear me say it, but I'm saying Ariel will hear me say it. We're driving in the car and say, this idiot. And you'll just be watching all these people in their car. And I'm not to the point where I have road rage, right? Right, like we say, that's not me. I do be calling people idiot or whatnot as I'm driving, but I'm not cussing people, giving them the finger. I'm not about to engage in road rage. But let's say this, though. Someone says, that's not me, and what anger does to you, you're mad in your car because they cut you off. What do you have when you basically don't control your anger? You were angry at first, but now what do you have?
Frustration.
If you basically allow yourself to get to road rage, you are participant. How does road rage work? You get cut off. Well, I'm big time honking my horn. Do you know that's not what your horn is for? Your horn is not in your car to show displeasure to other drivers. Your horn is in your car when they're coming on your lane accidentally. It's to let, I'm here, but it is not for you to be, getting angry with these people. So, here's what you have. I'm angry. Now I'm honking the horn. Now they're giving me the finger. Now they're pulling their phone out and they're letting me know that they're taping me. Now we're all speeding. Now you're coming in my lane. Now we've had a car accident. Now, is that what you wanted in your day?
And all because they were driving bad.
That's not me, right? That's not me. I wasn't the traffic problem. So, you let your anger escalate and it's okay, we've had a car accident. Well, maybe you don't have a car accident. Maybe you actually, this is what usually people don't account for. You're speeding down the road, but now you're stuck at the stoplight with each other. And what are they going to do? They're getting out of their car. They're breaking your window. Now we're all getting traffic tickets. And you've got a broke window. We're escalating. Plenty of people, they're coming out of their car, they get a baseball bat. And you basically say, hey, man, I'm not bringing a bat. I got my gun in the car. Why? Because we got angry while we were driving. So this is in multiple ways, y'all. This happens all over the place. You can put it in the workplace. You can put it all over the place. And let's talk about this. What happens, plenty of people have done this. They find out that their spouse has been unfaithful. And what do? Okay, that's not what as I started saying it, I knew that was coming.
Well, that's what my boss.
So Mark's answer, plenty of people have done this. It's in the Bible. It's in Proverbs 6, right? So plenty of people, when they find out their spouse has been unfaithful, Mark said, they shoot them. That's true.
Why that didn't happen like that.
Okay. Beat them.
For being unfaithful,
Yeah.
he shot him.
Well, somebody's getting unnecessarily, like, hurt in some way. So then we know it also happened something else. The husband caught the man that the wife was cheating with and just beat him. And we're saying common sense now. Everybody sees that coming. And the Bible says when a person finds out, they will not be restrained. No amount of gift, no amount of anything is going to calm them down. So the answer really is don't be doing that in the first place. But violence of some sort, but a lot of people, I'm saying if it's not violence, what would a spouse say? There are a lot of people that when they find out that their spouse has cheated, they say, I can do that too. And they go out and now they're fornicating with somebody. Has anything been fixed? No, you have actually made this process that much more difficult. And someone just says, well, I was angry. So, a lot of people would say, as you talk about these relationships and things like that, sometimes people don't, I'm saying it's a thing that we have to learn, right? Titus 2 says that people have to learn to be in a relationship, and older people who've had successful relationships need to teach younger people how to have successful relationships. So sometimes people get mistreated in relationships, and what do people say about that? Like you got one party in the relationship who gets walked all over, and the person, we say, what about them? A lot of people would say, they need to get angry. They just let this stuff happen. They need to get angry about this. Is that what they need? No. What they would need to do is basically someone would say, what you need to do is find a way to, in a clear fashion, articulate why you don't like this and why it cannot continue. And someone says, well, I don't know if that's going to work. Well, maybe it's time, let's say if you're not married, right? You're not married and someone says, well, then you don't need to make this a lasting relationship. But you don't have to be angry to do any of those things. So the advice, someone says, well, you need to get angry. That's not really what we need. So we have these illustrations all over the place. Anger's not helping anything. Proverbs 14:17. Yes, James.
Just like in Matthew, where a person was taking another person
Right, Matthew 18.
because he needed to pay him, and he forgave him of his payment.
He had been forgiven, and then he went out and choked another man. Exactly. I don't want to put that there. Okay. So Proverbs 14:17 says, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. So I'm not arguing. I believe Ephesians 4:26 says you can be angry and you're not sinning. But we're going to have a whole host of other passages, Proverbs 14:17, that's going to say, if you're allowing yourself to get this angry, you're about to start making bad decisions. So let's say it this way too. And this does bleed into other stuff. I think we've illustrated this bleeds into other matters of life. So, what's something else where somebody, they're basically justifying the things that they do while they're angry? What will they say? This says, if you're soon angry, you deal foolishly. How do people say it today?
It's been building.
Okay. Then they'll say it's been building, and so we would basically say you should have been putting structures in place where you weren't letting it build to this point. So what some people will do, they have now dealt foolishly, and speaking backwards on what they did foolishly, they will say, I didn't know what I was doing. This happened, they say, I just blacked out. And what I did next, I don't know. And some people say, what you said earlier, I just can't help it. If that's really true, what are they actually in fact guilty of? Ian did the class on it. They are now guilty of incontinency. If you have allowed yourself to become to this level where you say, I can't help myself, then you're guilty of 2 Timothy 3:3. A lot of people use incontinent for 1 Corinthians 7. It's sexual sins. A lot of people use it for smoking, where you're not in control. But a lot of people tell on themselves about their anger problem when they say, I get going, I just can't help it. Then you're guilty of 2 Timothy 3:3, and you're going to have to change. Everybody's working on it, And you might say, well, I don't know if everybody's working on it. The fact that we have a society that can operate, there are some people in the group who are working on it, and there are people in the group who are restraining themselves. So Proverbs 14:17 says it's not a good idea. If you're soon angry, you're dealing foolishly. We already covered this point. What was Cain before he was a murderer? Now, let's ask a silly question. What's the silly question people ask about Cain?
Where did he get his wife?
Where did Cain get his wife? Well, here's a silly question. Where did Esau get his wife? And y'all, when you're doing your Bible study, I don't know, I never know how to spell Esau. So you're doing your Bible study, and you're just reading over it, and you find things, and you say, well, I don't really know what this is going to matter. I don't know why this is in the Bible. But here's something. In Genesis 28, this is after the whole Isaac gives away Esau's birthright and blessing to Jacob. Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padanaram to take him a wife from thence, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother and was gone to Padanaram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac his father, then went Esau unto Ishmael and took unto the wives which he had, I don't even know how to say her name, daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, to be his wife. Now, why did he choose to marry this particular person?
Because his mother and father didn't like him.
Now, you have just lost your blessing.
That was right.
Okay. What will anger make you do if you don't check your anger? Look.
Tongues very fast.
He does say, Esau says, when my dad dies, I'll kill Jacob. But as he said in Proverbs 14:17, deal foolishly. Let's see it again. 14:17, you'll deal foolishly. Can you imagine, like, being in that marriage and you have to hear it said, the only reason we got married is because he wanted to stick it to his parents? And you know there are plenty of people out there who are doing this type of thing. And so when we read Genesis 28:6 and 9, a lot of people wouldn't register what's going on here. But this is something that you would senselessly do that has what type of consequences here? You're marrying this person because your parents don't like them. What have you just done?
You have irrationally but intentionally made your own situation worse.
You have, it says, intentionally and rationally made your, did you say irrational?
Irrational.
Intentionally and irrationally made your situation worse. How? There's a reason why they would say, we don't want you to marry this person. Their behavior patterns, their upbringings, and what you just did was you hitched yourself to them to hurt us, and you hurt yourself. This is in your Bible. These are just, someone would say, this is just a random piece of information who Esau married. There's reason to pay attention to these type of things. Why did Moses strike the rock when he was supposed to speak to it?
He was wrong.
That's it. Now, that's right, James, and I figured a lot of people would say, well, he didn't really believe God, which is what Numbers 20:12 says. The Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, said, because you believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. So there is this moment, I don't know what fully was going on in Moses' head. He's already struck the rock once before. This time God says, now I want you to speak to it. You know, I don't know if Moses basically says, we know this works because we've done it before. We're going to do it this way. I don't know. But like James says, let's look at this text. Psalm 106, 32 and 33, there was anger going on. It wasn't just a moment where, you know, he says, God said do it this way, and we're going to do it this way instead. That happened, but it's not all that there was. They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses for their sakes, because they provoked his spirit, so that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. What did he say? He said to the congregation before the rock, hear now, you rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? He is angry. And what does it cost him?
To go into the land.
He does not get to go into the promised land. Now, just to take a moment and revisit a lesson that Ian did. Ian said we should try to reframe our circumstances so that we don't just become consumed with negativity. He speaks unadvisedly, he allows anger to get in his way, and he is punished for it. But if you reframe that situation, what could you say for Moses? He's not going into the promised land. We had a teacher in school say, that doesn't have to be all bad. And he said, what was Moses' relationship like with these people for that time frame? They probably were sick of each other. And he said, it may be nice for Moses to get a little bit of space from everybody. It's possible to reframe things. Why was Naaman a leper longer than he had to be? So let's be honest here. If you have been sick, are you willing to try just about anything? There's a man in Martinsville, and he had just migraines all the time, and everybody's going to give you their advice on how to fix stuff, and sometimes that's nice, but sometimes I just don't know if that's going to work. I don't know about that. But this man had migraines, and someone said he was trying to do everything he could do to get rid of his migraines, up to the point of putting jalapeno peppers in his ear. But I'm saying when you're desperate, that makes no sense to me. You might be thinking, well, there's something to that. But when you're desperate, you will try anything. Why was Naaman if you're a leper, would you not be saying, yeah, I'll try anything at this moment? Why is he a leper longer than he has to be? When he gets what he needs to do and he doesn't want to do it, look what's said. The man comes out and tells him, go dip 7 times in the Jordan. And this is his response. Naaman was wroth, and he went away and said, behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. You're a leper. Someone says, I can tell you who to go see to heal your leprosy, and when you get there, because you don't like the prescription, you say, I'm not going to do it. You're angry and say, I'm not going to do it. He goes ahead and he does it anyway, and he's cleansed of his leprosy. And we, looking backwards, would say to such a person, now, don't you wish you had done that sooner? And that's what everybody says. I wish I had done this quicker. Okay, what gets in your way? Anger. Now, you could do a lot for Esau. If you go back to Esau real quick, what else did Esau basically allow his anger to do? What happens to Esau because he is consumed with anger?
He wanted to kill David.
He wants to kill Jacob, his brother. So, I can't imagine that in the last bit of life that they have, Isaac and their mother, I can't imagine he spends the last bit of time. Obviously, they don't have a good relationship, right? He's marrying people just to spite his parents. The last days of their lives, they don't have a good relationship. What happens with his brother Jacob? They don't have a relationship at all. And they do spend time apart, and when they get back together, Esau just says, that's in our past. Well, you would wish that we had come to that conclusion a bit sooner. Okay, why did he strike the rock? Why was Naaman a leper longer than he had to be? This is during our Kings and Chronicles class. Asa, who relatively is known to be a good king, yet so many people end up in prison during his time as king. And this is why. Look at this. He spends money hiring another nation to fight their battles, instead of making the statement, the Lord will deliver us. So he hires other nations to fight their battles, and a prophet comes to him and says, because you relied on the king of Syria and has not relied on the Lord thy God, therefore is the host of the king of Syria escaped out of your hand. Were not the Ethiopians and the Lubans a huge host, with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet because thou didst rely on the Lord, he delivered them into thine hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Herein thou hast done foolishly. Therefore, from henceforth thou shalt have wars. And Asa was very wroth with the seer, and put him in prison, for he was in a rage with him because of this thing, and Asa oppressed some of the people at the same time. You're simply told, you didn't win this particular battle, this is why you did not win, and because of your actions, now this is going to be the result. He gets angry, he puts the man in prison, you still got wars. So it didn't fix anything. That's what Ian said a moment ago. You intentionally and irrationally have made your situation worse. One more, what caused thousands of babies to be murdered in the first century? Jesus' time frame, Matthew 2:16. Herod when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and all the coast thereof from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Why is this a bad move if you're a king?
Say again? Repeat that.
He has all these babies 2 years old and younger. Because he's angry, he has them killed. And we said, why is this a bad move if you're a king?
Because he died.
Plenty of people get dethroned or assassinated. Look, you are in the throne at this moment does not mean you're staying there. This was a bad move. Someone says, well, maybe they're not going to kill him. What are they also possibly not going to do? You can put out executive orders and the people just don't follow them. Why? You don't care about us. You go back to 1 Kings chapter 12. The old wise men told Rehoboam, you work for the people. If you take care of them, they will take care of the kingdom. He does not care about the people.
And that's awful when you're in a system where basically you're higher up, so like Caesar is going to be interested in you having control over your area and will be willing to take you out if you...
Yeah, so I'm talking about the citizens.
Yeah.
And then Ian is saying, historically speaking, you're going to have the Roman nation over these people who are observing. You're making bad moves down there. You're causing us disruption. Okay, in conclusion, let's look at this one more time. One more point. It is a common trait of Pharisees. Luke 6, when he heals the man with the withered hand, they were all filled with madness. John 7:23, discussing the same instance, he says, you are angry at me because I have made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day. There are a lot of people that I'm saying inside of religion, they get angry about different stuff. Now, we looked at John 2 and we said people usually aren't getting angry over injustices. But the best thing that you can do is to keep a cool head. And let's look at this one more point as we close. Ephesians 4:26, someone says, well, Paul says I can sin, or I can be angry and not sin. That's true, but Paul did say you do not get to stay angry. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. What did he just say? Yeah, you're going to be angry. That's life. You're going to be angry. But you're going to have to keep yourself from allowing sin to actually develop, because you say, well, I started out angry and then I sinned. But also he's saying you don't just get to perpetually stay angry all the time. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. And if you do stay angry all the time, letting the sun go down upon your wrath, what does he say you're doing? This is Romans 13:14. You are giving. Let's look at Romans 13:14 really quickly. You are making provisions for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof. Give no place to the devil. Don't give provisions to the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof. You're going to be angry. You have to control your anger. I have to control my anger. We don't let it boil over. And also we don't get to stay angry about things. So, we look at this, and the way that we do this is, we look at everybody else and say, y'all need to be working on your anger. If we know about ourselves that we have been angry about something for a long period of time, that is your inner problem. And you need to fix it with your brethren, rather than saying, well, I was done such and such, and this all blah, blah, blah. Look, if you have been angry that long, you have a problem. We're not saying the other problem may not be a reality, but you still have a problem that you have allowed yourself to be angry this long, and you need to fix it. Okay, Mark, what were you going to say?
I was going to say in verse 29, he also says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. So even when he says, be ye angry and sin not, you got to control your tongue.
Yeah, he's going to say, verse 31, put these things away, and then he tells you, but rather be kind, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. So, when we said at the beginning, we're studying sin, and we're studying these different types of attributes so that we can actually say, this is the way we would rather be and ought to be. Okay, any questions, comments? All right, if nothing else, we'll stop here, take our quick break, and then we'll come back for our hour.